All right. Good morning, everybody. So, in case you don't know me, my name is Cameron. I am the Undergraduates Program Manager here at the API, and welcome to day 3 of the Power Up Summit, as we are final day of Power Up, the Power Up extravaganza known as the Power Up Summit. Thank you so much for coming. So today we've got a very exciting day lined up for you guys. We have the amazing Ryan Turner, who works for Aurecon. He's also a API board member as well. Be coming in today to give a very interesting presentation on the sorry, let me try that sentence again, pardon me, to give us a presentation on AI in the power sector. So that is what's coming up. So really appreciate everyone coming along. As I've mentioned, our amazing speaker today is Ryan Turner. So he is a power transmission and distribution practice leader in Queensland with Aurecon. And I really don't know too much about what that means. I'll hand over to Ryan now so he can introduce himself properly and kick off with his presentation. So over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Cameron. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I got this gig because I started to talk quite passionately about AI and some of the uses and interesting intersection in our industry of what the potential it has and how we use it in our organisation. So I've presented previously at the summer school on this, and Cameron asked me to bring another version of that to you today. So I am the transmission and distribution practice leader here at Aurecon in Queensland. So I lead a team of around 60 odd people, mostly doing engineering design and power system studies, planning and generator connections, that sort of thing. So we take a lot of interns in our team. So I'm very passionate about supporting the API and actually I think we get a lot of value out of it because it's those people that bring the current thinking and the skills that are being able to deploy in things like AI and engineering design. So I'll talk you through some examples later on. So next slide, please, Cameron. So I'm just going to go over what generative AI is and AI in the power sector. So I'll talk about where we are in terms of what the technology is, and most of you are probably users of this, and where it is going. So I'll talk about how we use it in our business as a consulting engineering advisory firm, and I'll also give you some case studies and potential future uses, some things that we're working on, some ideas that we've got, and hopefully some practical things that relate to what you're studying. Next slide. I like this quote from Bill Gates. It's an old one. It's something that I picked up on, and I thought it summarizes perfectly what's going on in the AI sector and the pace of change. So we hear a lot of predictions around how AI is impacting many different industries and how quickly it is. Things like that it's going to replace jobs. The massive productivity gains we're going to get from using this. We aren't seeing those. So at the moment to the scale or to the pace that they've been forecast, but the actual change that this is going to enable is unprecedented. I think there's over 1 billion users of this, all experimenting with it at the moment, and it's going to have a profound effect on our lives, going forward. And I think this sort of shows we should keep grounded in terms of what the potential is of this. Next slide, please. So it's just sort of covers the different types of artificial intelligence, and so it's been around for over 70 years now, and it's a field of computer science that was around just after World War II, and where it sort of went after that was around machine learning, and that's where we sort of do more pattern recognition, and largely it was technology that started to drive the changes in these different areas of AI. So we got into deep learning, looking into neural networks and different mathematical models to do that. And in the current state, we're in this what we call generative AI, and that's where we're getting new processes. And this was largely unlocked by Google and some research they were doing around that, and also, as you'd be aware, some breakthroughs in technology using graphics processing units. So that enabled the scale that we see today. Next slide, please. So it is quite fascinating. It's the fastest technology take up in history. And I like this graph's a little bit out of date now, but earlier, I think it was this year that ChatGPT hit 1 billion users. and they actually still have over 700 million weekly users of that, and so now there's over 1 billion people use chatbots regularly across the world. So I sort of wondered why this might have had a more rapid impact than previous technology, and you can quickly understand that it's very broad based, and with that fast diffusion across the world, it has the potential to provide greater impact. And perhaps it's also that knowledge work transforms faster. So it's something that does, we have more knowledge workers, and it's the industry you're going to enter, and it has a faster impact on our work. And we've also got agentic systems. I'll talk about agents a bit later, being able to short, complex problems or adaptation of complex problems. So some factors that impact the rate of adoption include its relative advantage. So it seems much better than other ways of generating meaningful text, and it was also free. So perhaps that is one of the factors that drove the fast take up. It's compatible, so innovations must be compatible with the user's needs. So it's something that we can use and quickly see across our lives, both private and professional. It's complexity, so we've configured it to work as a chatbot. It's conversational, it's easy to communicate with, and that makes it relatable, and you want to come back and use it again. And it's trialability. As I said, it's easy to try, and there's no downside to trying it. It's free, and it's observable. So you can, it's unavoidable to hear about other users. So from how it might help you to get a better response for your assignment, to how it can solve some problems that you're dealing with in the work environment. Next slide, please. So I talk about how it is accessible to everyone. It's getting cheaper as it becomes more accessible. So the smarter models are getting more efficient to run. And this is a graph I've been following for some time now. It's a professor at Wharton University in the US, Professor Ethan Mollick. He has a very good Substack. It's linked down the bottom there. And he's been plotting the performance in terms of one of the benchmarks that they test AI models on versus cost. And you can see here that down the bottom left, we have the GPT-4, one of the first chat GPT models released in March 2023. And it started at around $50 per million tokens, which is about one word. And now if we follow that curve all the way over to the far right, we've got the newest model, GPT-5 Nano version, and it's down at like 14 cents for the same million tokens. So we now have, in the last few weeks even, there were two models, an OpenAI model and a Google model, where the chatbot got gold medals in the International Math Olympiad. So, and as you can see there, they're performing above, the human PhD range. So the pace of improvement in these models has been nothing short of extraordinary. Next slide, please. I spoke about agents before. It's something that you might have heard about, and it's probably what the current focus and excitement is around. And so this just sort of compares the different automation and agents. And so automation is a data and workflow to put into a script and run that script to automate what you might do by hand otherwise. So with machine learning, you basically train a model, an algorithm on data, and you can then predict and classify results on that. And an example of that is obviously pattern recognition in pictures and results. Generative AI, that's the one that we're most familiar with at the moment. So you prompt a large language model chatbot, and it can generate a response for you and a different medium of that response depending on what you're asking it to do. The agents are something that we designed to communicate with a large language model to then act on a series of steps. And so it makes some decisions and executes workflows based on that to achieve some goals that you've set it as an outcome. Next slide, please. In Aurecon, our AI solution approach is to focus on the right problems. So we face a lot of problems in terms of that's our business is trying to solve those problems. So we try and focus on the most critical challenges. We then have to understand and gather the right data for that, and that's also about curating, cleansing, preparing the data, and being able to work with it in the right domain. Having the right expertise, so having experts, drive this design, the solutions, and verify and validate is critical. So we have experts across all engineering sectors that are able to inform our solutions, and then we deploy these based on where we see the value to society and our clients. Next slide, please. So next slide again. I won't go into too much detail on this, but there are some risks associated with AI. So you've got governance and regulatory, requirements that are still sort of being worked through and in development to manage these things. And I think it's important for everyone to understand at their development level what they have to do for that. So you've got the macro risks, which you can read about and research about, across the world, and superpowers and how they might use those. But yeah, the risk will be there for until there's a resolution around how we regulate and what the greater good is of how we use these tools. Next slide, please. The 6 applications of AI that we're seeing. This was from a worldwide conference, a Microsoft conference that our digital and AI lead went to, and you'd be using some of these in your day-to-day usage of these tools. So you've got tasks, running automation and recognizing objects and patterns and things like that. You've got content creation, which has probably seen the most growth this year. There's been some fascinating video generating examples now, and you've also got music, text, and images. So we've got humans, so you now use AI to generate voices and people and deep fakes, which there's been a lot in the media lately around some people and their relationships with AI. So insights, machine learning, data science, so complex, and then the human. So that's something that isn't as obvious at the moment, but has a huge potential around augmenting the human with exoskeletons and prosthetics and things like that. Next slide, please. This is just a couple of examples of how we use it in our business. So we have a tool called Recall, which is basically our hosted, firewalled ChatGPT-like interface. And so we use that we've trained that and allowed it access to all of the knowledge that we have within our business. And it provides an interface for us to go in and gather the enterprise knowledge, whether it's to understand something about a client or an industry that we're pitching to work for, or some solutions we're looking to develop for them. And the take up of that's been quite extraordinary. So we've had earlier this year, the stats said it was over 6,500 users, and there's only just 1,000 more than that in our business in total. There are over 300,000 sessions. But what was interesting was some of the statistics that we gathered out of it that said about 3/4 of all questions were about enhancing efficiency. So people were asking about how can I do things quicker, better, smarter. So about 1/4 of them were deeply technical questions that could only be answered because it has access to our institutional knowledge, and people trusted it to be able to go and source that quicker than what they could do themselves. About 1/4 were skills building, so people wanted it to use to learn and improve themselves. And it also hosts our AI driven agents that we'll develop, which I'll talk a couple of them. One's a project management tool, and I've got a couple of other examples that I'll go through as well. We estimate that it's saved over 20,000 hours of time in our business just in a 1-year period, and the actual value could be a lot higher than that, and it's still growing today. So next slide, please. This was just one example around an automated RFI. So when we deliver designs for construction and they go to the client, to a contractor to build those things, you get a lot of queries back on the design. They might be some things that weren't considered or have changed on site, some different ideas about what they want to do with that. And often these are very time intensive to then go through drawings and reports and respond to these things. And so we developed a tool to learn and quickly get to the bottom of the request, looking at even drawings and highlighting the issue or the question, and coming up with learning from previous responses and coming up with suggestions as to what we can do. And we trialed that with a major data center client, and we found it did save a lot of time, and they were very impressed, and wanted to see how they could use that across their portfolio. So we're now rolling that out to different industries, and it's something that I see has benefit when you're designing things to be constructed. Next slide, please. Another here is I've just shown an example on the right, which doesn't relate to what it is, but it's an asset management or an inspection tool. So going and inspecting, in this case, it's a little switchboard for the condition or compliance or capacity. The user would go and look at it and input some information into a database to come up with and give it an overall rating, and also develop a workflow of what might need to do. But we worked out that with a generative AI tool, you could actually take a photo of it, and with the right prompting, you get it to identify what's in that photo from a certain subset of information that you're interested in. So the example on the right is just an AI tool asked to identify the things that it sees in the photo and to put a box around them. And you can see that if you could do that, you can actually take a photo of the asset and the thing that you're looking at, and tell it to identify those things in there, and then to start to look at it and draw some insights, and observations on that. So you link those two together, and you make a more efficient process, and make it a lot easier to get through a number of assets in quick order. Next slide, please. Here, I'll just talk about some of the things that we're working on in our industry, in the power industry, and also some ideas of things that have value in the future. And one that we have worked on with a client who is a transmission network service provider. So they have a lot of renewable connections that apply to connect to their network, and there's a regulatory response they have to go through to respond to that. Largely, it is they assess the location they want to connect and the capacity that they want. They come up with a specification, a set of documents that define the scope of works and the design of the substation or transmission line they connect to, and then they produce a few drawings that go with that. And we developed a solution to that automates some of that, but it actually puts a large language model, front end user interface to that to derive knowledge from their internal standards, specifications, and planning tools, and come up with the first pass of that, of what the human would have had to do over a number of days or even weeks. So we can automate development of those documents and deliverables, and we're now moving into an era where we can start to even generate the drawings, so key diagrams, single line diagram, and develop that package. There's always human oversight in this, so I think of it more as a user interface driving the large language model, which has agentic workflows attached to it. It's not a plug and play where you sit back and it gives you the answer and you send that to the customer. So it's got this embedded human in the loop and validation at the end. Knowledge agents are something that we're developing at the moment, so I sort of touched on that there. Knowledge agents are trained to analyze a large subset of data or documents that you have, and that can then start to compartmentalize that into areas that make it easy to access and gain information from. And we've trained those on anything from a industry conference, many 10 years worth of industry papers, and being able to then map that out and link it to a large language model chatbot enables you to go in and ask the questions, and it gives a more efficient targeted response by knowing where to look for that stuff. I see there's value in that in our business to link it to the organizational knowledge that you have, the enterprise knowledge, so standards, papers, reports, and the like, to give it context as to what if you're designing something for electricity network, for example, you want to know what that client or that jurisdiction's specifications are for that. And so you can start to tell it to look in a certain area to get the right information out and feed that back to the design. You may have heard of vibe coding. So vibe coding is the non-coders. I'm a vibe coder myself. So you ask a large language model, ChatGPT or Claude, to generate some code for you. You can very quickly get a working app and test it and iterate that. So we've had examples where we've had non-coders develop 1,000-odd line code automations, and then we can, using those as the expert who has the background in understanding engineering and the design processes and calculations, we can now start to very quickly code up tools to do that thing for us. And one that we've had is to automate a repetitious design and look through different optimizations of that, very quickly, rather than sit down and get a code, like a software developer, to do that. So we're all vibe coders, or we could be software engineers and have a lot more experience in that. But it's a tool that allows us to quickly trial and deploy tools to support now engineering design. And that leads me to the last point there in this agentic workflows. We have, using these things and the agent sort of process, we're able to develop these tools and support. And an example might be for a substation design. We have a lot of, we develop a 3D model in CAD software that lays out a transmission substation based on the client standards, but there's various engineering calculations that have to go into, verifying the spatial arrangement, the separation, the forces on conductors and plant during short circuits or wind and things like that. Also the ratings of conductors and bus bars. And we're in the midst of coding up a lot of the tools to help us do that in Python, using the large language models. And by having these in a suite of platform-based software, we can then interact with those and communicate with them from a user interface that we develop using a chatbot or a large language model. We can then use that to communicate with simulation models. So it might talk to a vendor-specific piece of software through an API to tell it to run a simulation, get some results, bring that back, interpret that through develop a calculation, pulling from the client standards. And these things all talk to each other, but the large language model makes the decisions based on the discussion and the conversation with the user to determine what's the right tool, what's the right input, gets the results back. And we ask it to then document the workflow and even standard calculations that it might go and use, such that it's verifiable. So the user at the end can validate that and verify it, and we can sign off. So these are all things we're starting to embed in our day-to-day engineering design. And I think that what your role is helping to create these tools as you enter the workforce and bring the engineering knowledge to this, and because you'll be doing design very differently to how we've been doing it today. How am I going for time, Cam? That's the end of my slides there.
No, you are like really on time. So we've got actually a little bit extra time for Q&A actually. So you're spot on. So first off, fascinating presentation. Thank you so much, Ryan. So just moving on to the Q&A section. Does anyone have any questions for Ryan about that? Yep. Do you want to jump off mute, Anna? And then we'll go Cass next. So I think I saw Anna first.
Yeah.
Sorry, Cass, you're about half a second late. Sorry, carry on, Anna.
Yeah, I'm good. I was just curious. So you mentioned like all these like applications that like you can have of AI in the professional engineering space. Do you think there are any limitations that we should be like particularly aware of as like going into engineering that we should be mindful of when we do utilize these tools?
I think it's just about always having the expertise to understand the output or the use of the tool. So for having the right problem and using it for it. The risk lies in that as it gets better and better, it will be able to produce tools to do more complex tasks, and having trust in what it actually produces, because we all know about hallucinations. So it likes to give an answer. It'll always give an answer, even if it doesn't know the answer. So if it gives a wrong answer, it starts to justify that it is right. And so having the understanding and the basis of the fundamentals. One of the concerns that we've been talking about here is if we develop these tools, and it sort of moves to this point where a lot of engineering, this is my personal view, a lot of the engineering we do will start to have a different interface to how we start it and complete that, being largely conversational chatbots to help us get started and set out a series of calculations and design. And I think what we don't want to miss is the opportunity to learn from doing that. If it starts to be put into a black box, and you're just talking to a chat GPT to come up with solving something, if you're not seeing what's in the box and the engineering that goes behind it, you don't actually learn something. Because when you start, typically, historically what you would do is you'd be doing hand calculations, you'd be writing reports, you'd be building simulation models, getting them checked and running them yourself. If you're putting all this into a workflow where you're telling it what to do, it's nearly like you've got an intern helping you. But if you're still learning yourself, how do you know what comes out is right at the back end? And that's where I think it's still really important to have to learn the fundamentals, to train by still doing things by hand and calc, and understand, am I getting the right result out, and can I validate that? And that's why I like to think about everything that we get, that we hard code into tools or a platform to do design and analysis for us. We should get it to tell us what has it done, so that we can check it. So that way, I still think it's important you test yourself and are able to do it the long way, but then you'll also be able to validate what comes out and and trust it.
Okay, brilliant.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. And then we had Cass up next.
Thanks, Cam. So it's a bit of a question, less technical, but more sort of holistic. So in distribution and transmission, obviously, we're interfacing directly with customers, specifically with distribution. Customers already have low levels of trust in distribution and the power sector. And there is obviously the talk about people still have lack of trust in AI as well. So I suppose, is there a concern that bringing AI into an industry where there's already a lack of trust is going to further reduce that trust? And what are some ways that we might be able to make sure we don't do that and go down that path?
Very good question, and so spot on with the concerns in the industry at the moment. So the industry did, and we've seen it go through a few transitions over the last sort of throughout my career, the last 20 odd years. Trust has eroded over time, and it's eroded because of perceptions of cost increases, the lack of choice, and with rooftop solar and not being allowed to put on what you want or have it operate in the time that you want. All different things over time have impacted that. And I think AI, obviously we wouldn't allow AI tools to use private, to treat private, to respect the privacy. So I think there are examples of where it can be beneficial at a user's level to analyze metering data, for example. So what's my electricity metering usage look like, and what insights can you draw from it? I've seen examples where it can start to then tell you how many people live in the house and how old those people are, and what habits you have and all that. Obviously, that's a cause for concern. But on the other hand, using it the right way might tell you how to be more energy efficient. So what it might tell you where there's a faulty appliance, or the time frame of it isn't actually maximizing the value for you. And I think if you can pitch the value to customers and show them how you're always respecting the privacy, and you allow them to opt into these options, they will be more receptive. And I think ultimately, if we use it for a good cause, in that, one of the best things I think that it can help us at the moment is to bring down costs. We have costs that are too high, whether it's at the distribution level, at the retail level, or even at the transmission level. It's a massive focus for us at the moment. We're a relatively high cost country in terms of our labour inputs. Our materials, we source a lot of our key assets and plant from overseas, so we pay, there's a inflation driven supply chain impacts on that over the last few years. So I think doing anything we can to increase the productivity and the value engineering in what we do will help us to gain back trust, with customers again. So it's a good question. I think we have to always have that at the front of our minds as to how do we build trust before we go and tell people what's best for them.
Yeah, perfect. I really liked your use as well to opt in. I think that's the key thing that allows customers to choose whether they buy into this or not. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
Lovely. I've also got a question from the Slido here for you, Ryan. So the question is, what is one thing that AI implementation has improved the most?
I think the thing that I see and that I use myself, it is our report writing. It is the writing skills, and it's a bit of a two-edged sword, if you like, in that I see a lot of people use it too, and I can pick up now. I can read something that comes across my desk, whether it's a CV or a letter or a report. It's obvious as anything when it's written by AI. So people using it to that extent are going to be found out, because that then it enables it causes them to lose trust in the person that they're trying to communicate with. You will lose trust if you're outsourcing all of the writing and thinking that you want to do to an AI tool. However, on the converse of that, using it as an editor, to help you with getting started on something, if you treat it as something to support you and as a tool, it can be very, very valuable. And so I encourage my team to never use it to write the response you want to write, but get it to check what you want to say, and you'll get a much better, much more nuanced response for that, and you'll learn how to prompt with it. So if you're using AI tools regularly and communicating with it, you'll start to understand about how prompts influence it and what sort of magic you can get out of it and what it can do. So I think that I encourage you to use it in that way. And if you see there's something you suspect is by AI, by someone you're working with, and that, call it out. Just ask them and just say, look, I think this doesn't read the way that you're communicating to me. So it actually, so that's the written form of communication, because I think, we have wonderful verbal communication. We don't want to lose the personality and the way that we can express ourselves in our writing by outsourcing it to a machine.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Did anyone else have any questions for Ryan? We've got time for a couple more. If anyone's happy to jump off mute. If not, chuck it in the Slido. I do have a quick question for you, Ryan, as well, just to go back into your presentation. So, hang on, I've clicked on the wrong slide. Pardon me. You mentioned that you guys at Aurecon had built your own your own AI system or model. I'm not entirely sure what the correct terminology is there. I just wondering, how did you go about building that? So what was the planning process that went into it, and what was the advantage of building your own AI model rather than sort of using one that, like, for example, ChatGPT or something that's already existed and customizing it for your own use?
Well, there's a couple of ways around that. So one is the recall that I mentioned before is actually a ChatGPT model. So inevitably, most of the models that you'll find in organizations and ones that you'll go and work for, they are public models. They're models that are available, and you can either use mini models. So they do make mini ones that you can host locally on your in your domain, so on your servers. And they're efficient, they're quick and easy, and they're good for basic tasks, like writing and checking and summarizing things and coming up with basic calculations. They're very different to the models that run in, huge data centers in the US and the like. Those ones are the ones solving humanity's problems, the ones beating the math Olympiads and all that. But as we move on, the better models keep filtering down into these cheaper, smaller models that we can host locally. And so one day you'll actually have these models on your phone even and things like that. I think Google already does. We use those models, the smaller ones, to support us in those daily sort of communications, and we're adding in other models to do that. But we don't develop those models ourselves. Very few do, because of the cost to do that. I'm aware that Stanford University has proven they can develop their own model at a fairly low cost using a certain sort of subset of training data, but it's expensive to train models and do that. What we then do, so that's the one that it becomes the engine that you start to talk to, the interface. What we then do is we can then use those and supplement them with other tools and processes and workflows and information to get a better system out of it. And that's the proprietary one. So that's then, so you're buying or subscribing to it through use of a proprietary model, and then you're augmenting it with your own tools and workflows and agents to do that. So, and when we say about agents, that's what probably most organizations and businesses out there are developing these agents at the moment. And even the major AI labs like OpenAI and Claude, they're using you probably use an agent already if it's going and searching the web and doing subset of tasks related to what you're prompting in your query is. It can build a website, even host it, publish it, things like that. That's all agentic sort of workflows, and that's what all the focus is at the moment about using these existing models. What's interesting is as the big labs get bigger and better, they create such a lead that it's going to be hard for others to catch up on that, because it's supporting in terms of the feedback loop and the intelligence that it gains is scarily good. But there's a lot of discussion at the moment about Apple, and Apple didn't join the race for AI, and we're looking to deploy others. You'll see that their share price has gone down quite a lot because the market thinks that Apple got too far behind and they'll never ever catch up on that. So even Microsoft have just published their first model. So they had partnered with OpenAI, but they've recently just published a much smaller model that was trained on a sort of smaller subset of data. And there's some consensus that the OpenAI and Claude and others that are the biggest labs will have such a lead that it's going to be very difficult for others to catch up on. I actually don't know. I think as it does become more democratized, that perhaps it will get easier to access data, train models, and it becomes cheaper and they perform better. And we're seeing models that were once very expensive now be freely available, and you won't ever have to subscribe to them. So it is a bit of a mix, but yeah, we I think most organizations that I hear about, they do subscribe and host their own models, and that's also a privacy sort of control. So having it on your own system, firewalled off from the internet, means that your users aren't going to upload sensitive, confidential information that can then get out into the large labs that they can then use to train their own models on. So I will say on the privacy front, there's I believe OpenAI has an opt-out. You can select an option for it not to train on your data. There is a little bit of sort of concern about how accurate and how trusted that is. I think Claude is the most trusted in that it does not train on your data, and that's a pact that they make with the user in their terms and conditions. Some others are a lot harder to opt out of that. So it's always, if you are uploading sensitive or confidential information, you do want to make sure you understand and trust what you're using it for.
Brilliant. Was there any other questions for Ryan? Does anyone want to jump off mute or put something in the chat?
I will say, bring your, as you enter the workforce, even as an intern or as a graduate, bring your ideas. I think it's I like to think I'm a connector of different ideas, and some of the best ideas come from those who are new to our industry. So they come with a fresh perspective and ask, well, why not? Why can't we do this? Or what if we did this? That's where you'll be a shaper of a different way that we do things, and you'll help solve some of the challenges and build the trust that we need to. So I've led my team to be not just aware of the potential and the threat of AI and its use in everyday work. I encourage them to experiment and to use it, because I said we're on this exponential growth curve, and if you sit back and watch and wait for it to come back to you, you're just going to get left behind. Whereas if you embrace it, use it every day that you can, and try it as much as you can, even if you find there's relative failures that it can't do or didn't help you do what you want to do, that's all really valuable to understand. How will these tools help us to be better engineers and solve some of the challenges that we have in our sector, because our sector is being asked to deliver on some of society's greatest challenges.
Brilliant. And Cass, I just saw your hand go up again. Do you have as I always say, and I did forget to say this at the start of the session, which I do apologize for, but no question too big or small or too silly. Do you want to ask it, Cass, or you?
It was, I suppose, really just my other question repackaged a little bit. I suppose I'm just interested in, and it might be just a quick answer because you kind of touched on it, but do you foresee or have concerns that AI might erode human interaction if we start to use it too much in either communication or as platforms to support customer interaction through the business? But yeah, it's kind of my other question, I suppose, repackaged a little bit.
Yeah, I do see that, and that's why I said it's important that we keep the human in the loop. Both in a not just the front end interface and back end. It's throughout it. So it's we should be designing the tools and the workflows that we ask it to use. It's better that we code a calculation rather than we trust it to go and work it out and develop it itself. And we should be able to validate every step that it goes through along the way. I think that's that's important. And, we're seeing evidence in society of where we're starting to outsource to it. And it is very, very successful. That there's some papers out at the moment around diagnostic success for some AI tools versus doctors, for example. So, and I've been following that closely. And so it's sort of what got me interested in the first place, because it was, a famous study that sort of said that doctors with ChatGPT outperformed doctors without it, but ChatGPT by itself performed even better again. And what they found was that the doctors with ChatGPT were basically overruling it sometimes. But those that did really well with it were trusting it, not to give it an answer, but they were engaging with it to help it understand better. So, and what we're seeing now is some of the results coming through. It's doctors can't beat like a ChatGPT or a large language model at interpreting stuff, and it's scary, but it's also exciting. It's exciting because it means that we're going to get things more accurate, but it's scary because they then go, do we need these people? Because we've now got a tool that can do that. These are the philosophical questions as a society that we're going to have to deal with and go, how do we make the most of, how do we control this and make the most of the value that it can bring, but still value the people that that obviously know how the decisions that it's making and what they mean.
Okay. There you go. It is a very fascinating question, and one of the more fascinating questions that we'll face going forward. We are just about on time, though. I do notice, Andrew, you've just jumped off mute. Do you have a question for Ryan that you'd like to ask? So you can ask here or in the chat or in the Slido.
I hope I've sort of enabled you to visualize what's possible and where we're going. It's a bit hard to give examples on this because it's either code or chat, and there's not a nice model to show you that can do this sort of stuff. And look, a lot of it is still in development and experimentation. But when you get into organizations in our sector, I'm sure you'll be exposed to different models and things that do all this stuff. And I think now you should be aware about how you can interface with these things in engineering in the day-to-day. And I think that, if you work in a business like ours, I'm sure you're going to get exposed to some of these solutions in the work that you end up leading.
Okay, brilliant. Okie dokie. We've just got Stefan typing in the chat, so I think he might have a question. Oh, no, so sorry, Stefan's got to jump off. That's all good. Well, in that case, we might... actually, sorry, Ryan, I have one more very quick question for you, then we'll jump over to the next part of the session. You just mentioned like how much your team is now using AI, and it was saving however many thousand sort of hours of work per week. How did you and your team go actually integrating that into day-to-day work? So I would imagine that would be a bit of a change for a lot of people as to, like, compared to how they would normally go about their sort of day-to-day business, I suppose.
I think it'd be interesting to look at the subset of people that are the users of it, or the regular users. Largely the business. So to go back a couple of years, it was put in place by the executive team as our strategy. So our strategy is to embrace generative AI and to encourage its use more. And so by not putting boundaries on it, that was something that our business did that was different to others, because you'll hear of examples of other businesses that said, you can't use this tool. We don't trust it. It's bad for our trust, and we could get results that are wrong, and so we don't know how to control that. So we're just going to ban it. Whereas we went the other way and said, let's embrace it, let's encourage it. And so we put in place some protections like hosting it locally and encouraging people, please use this one. You're welcome to use other one, but do know here's a guidelines or code of ethics about what is and isn't allowed to do that. But it's like, go and use it because it's part of our strategy. We're going to learn from your use on it, and so I think that those that have been using it are probably the more progressive people who are curious, experimenting. There are examples of a lot of people that dive into it and one shot it with a request to try and do something, and they don't get much value out of it, so they give up. And so that's a mistake, because you've actually got to learn how to communicate better with it to get the better value out of what it's doing.
Okay. Really interesting stuff. Okay, lovely. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. So we are perfectly on time, actually. So we'll call that good there. So can I just get everyone to give a massive either virtual or not virtual round of applause for Ryan? Thank you so much for coming along. Oh, Anna, did you have another question, or was that? Oh no, just a reaction. Sorry, yep, carry on. All good. I thought it was a hand, not a clap. That's my bad. Anyway, thank you so much for coming along today, Ryan. It's a really fascinating presentation, and yeah, as you say, it's the use of AI as we go forward is a very interesting. It's going to be a very interesting part of how we integrate that into society widely and into the workplace. And yeah, so it'll be fascinating. I think it's what you've shared is a fascinating insight. I do hope that the branding that the Terminator movies gave AI in the 80s hasn't, completely was using it properly in the future. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you so much.